How's it going, everybody? This is Cameron White with White Light Astrology, giving you guys your weekly forecast of what the fuck is going on in the universe for March 11th through March 18th of 2019. Thank you guys so much for being here and liking and sharing, commenting, and subscribing. I love and appreciate every single one of you guys. I owe you guys an apology or an explanation. I haven't been doing I didn't do my monthlies for March, and I haven't done my weeklies for the past 2 weeks, and I apologize if you guys were kind of expecting those and didn't receive it. It's been a kind of a weird couple weeks for me. This Mercury Retrograde in Pisces, Sun being in Pisces, just not the best time for me to be able to be on camera and be able to do this stuff. So I kind of took a break, got my head right, and now I'm back. I feel better than ever going into this stuff, so I just wanted to thank you guys for still sticking with me, and you know, again, sorry if I put down any let down any expectations for you guys, but I do appreciate you guys coming right back here and watching this again, and let's get right back on track. It has been a while since we've last talked, and there's been quite a few things that's happened. We've had Uranus now go into Taurus. We just got off of the new moon in Pisces. Venus is in Aquarius. Mercury is retrograde now. There's been quite a bit of change since I've last been on my weekly horoscope. So there's not. I don't want to go into all of that stuff because I mean it's kind of all in the past at this moment. We are going to be talking about this week, but you know, I just wanted to say before we kind of go into the horoscope, with Uranus being in Taurus now, like that, I mean, you guys have probably seen it through other astrologers, or if you're on Twitter, it's been talked about on Twitter like nonstop. But Uranus is now in Taurus, and this is a whole new 7-year shift that we're going into. And that idea of Uranus being this planet of liberation and freedom and breakthroughs and breakdowns, this challenge of being able to break through and liberate through, you know, solid material ground, that's that Taurus energy, and being able to find more experimental, more creative ways of having that stability and that security that Taurus represents, while also being able to handle the pitfalls of Uranus in Taurus, where Taurus is a grounding sign. It's very stable and secure. And as Uranus is going through here and kind of breaking up that ground, it's more of a challenge now than ever to be able to find some type of sense of ground and some sense of stability as we have Uranus going through here. So that's a really big shift. And of course, for the next 7 years, for the better part of a decade, we're all going to be talking about that. So there's plenty to talk about with that. Not Uranus. We just had the new moon in Pisces as well. With Pisces season being here, the moon just got out of this new moon in Pisces where we were able to really kind of open up doors to new opportunities and experiences, and especially when it comes to the terms of your environment and your beliefs and how your environment affects you, how you're susceptible to those things. And as we've had Jupiter squaring everything that's in Pisces right now, there's a lot of, you know, kind of revealing the truth through the mysticism and illusion that, you know, can sometimes be questionable. And as Jupiter's kind of going over on top of all this stuff, especially with this new moon that we just had in Pisces, this is kind of like really understanding the waters that we're in. It's kind of like, you know, if you're in like the ocean, you could see when you're at the first 5 or 10 feet, you know, inside the ocean, you can basically kind of see what's around you. But once you go a little bit deeper and the water gets more murky, you can't see even if it's right there in front of you. And I think that's just important with this new moon in Pisces, as well. Both of the luminaries are in the sign of Pisces. It's kind of like, let's clear out this murkiness and let's let the water settle so we can have a better vision of things. And so now we just got done with Uranus, you know, ingressing into Taurus for the last time, and they'll be there for the next 7 years. We just got done with the new moon in Pisces. Venus is in Aquarius too right now. And the last time that we talked was Venus was at the end degrees of Capricorn, and you know, to be honest, it's felt like a breath of fresh air with Venus now in Aquarius. Although she's still in the same sign of Saturn, you know, Saturn rules both Capricorn and Aquarius. With Venus now being in Aquarius, where she's in an air sign and she can have a little bit more breathing room, is a really good way to put it. She can kind of handle her sense of value, her sense of connection, and how she wants to bring things together. She can really do that job in a little bit more of a creative way, a little bit more of a stricter way. While Venus is in Capricorn, it's very much let's play by the rules. Venus is in Aquarius is like, yeah, sure, this is what the rule book says, but how can we do, even though we're breaking the rules, how can we do it better and something that makes a little bit more sense? So, like I said, we did have a lot of changes, you know, since the last time that we talked. However, this week isn't really all too crazy. We do have Mercury going Cazimi underneath the sun. We do have the sun squaring Jupiter. And that's basically about it. We have Mercury squaring Jupiter too, and which is going to be a little bit important, which we'll be getting into. But this week really does calm down in a sense. The biggest thing that I did see about this week, though, is that as the moon goes through Taurus and goes through Gemini, Cancer, Leo, it's going to be making some really hard aspects to a majority of the planets. So I really do see the moon kind of carrying the weight of this week, of how things are really going to go and how things are really going to be. So with that being said, let's go ahead and get into the horoscope. So starting off today on Monday, March 11th, we have the moon in Taurus right now, and it's applying to a conjunction with Mars, and it's eventually going to be trining Saturn. And so something that I've been really noticing with Mars being in Taurus while it's starting to make this trine to Saturn is Taurus is a fixed sign. Things are staying the same. Like, things aren't in the middle of, change or starting new. It's like, when the sun's in Leo, it's summertime in North America. When the sun's in Scorpio, everything's dying. When the sun's in Taurus, everything's growing. It's kind of like things are staying where they are in whatever situation that it's in. And so Mars, with this planet of action and energy and drive, ambition, it can deal with anger, it can deal with, temperament and things like that. Mars in Taurus isn't really changing its mind about anything. And so as Mars was in Aries, basically from January through February, Mars in Aries was initiating. Mars in Aries was starting. Mars in Aries was confronting. And now as Mars is in Taurus, this is about stabilizing and keeping that rhythm. Now, as the moon applies to this conjunction with Mars, this is really about going, how can I settle myself into this action even more? How can I settle myself into this drive and into this routine even a little bit better? I don't want to say the word routine. I want to say words like stability, comfort, not so much as ease, but like, it's kind of like you can't stop a train within, 20 feet if you wanted to. Like, if you want to stop a train, it's going to take a couple miles for that train to stop. So while the moon is applying to conjunction with Mars and Taurus, it's kind of like, it's not about stopping anything at all. It's just the analogy of, this is a weight that's moving forward, and how can we get comfortable with this? And how can we, with also Mars going to be trining Saturn this week, the moon applying to a trine with Saturn, this is really about going, hey, what do I need to construct? What do I need to have framework on? How do I need to, quote unquote, get my shit together with this energy that I'm kind of hauling with? Now, Monday is going to be a little bit easier. Things are going to be a little bit stable as the moon is in Taurus, because that's its exaltation. However, as we move into Tuesday, March 12th, we are going to have the moon go into Gemini. And not a whole lot is happening on Tuesday besides the moon going into Gemini. It's when Wednesday things get to be a little bit more picked up. However, on Tuesday as the moon goes into Gemini, I really do think that a lot more of these Mercury retrograde issues that are so, stereotypical and common are really going to start coming alive. And as the moon goes into Gemini, it's highlighting Mercury. Where's Mercury? It's underneath the beams, it's combust. It's in its detriment, it's retrograde. So expect while the moon's going through Gemini, the moon in Gemini is kind of like very talkative, very inquisitive, wanting to communicate, wanting to understand, wanting to get the message is a good way to put it. And as the moon goes into Gemini, I really think that this Mercury retrograde is going to stick out a little bit more, where things are going to be a little bit more confusing than they normally would. Like, while the moon's in Gemini, it needs Mercury to operate properly, and Mercury's just not operating properly right now, so the moon in Gemini is just going to be kind of a manifestation of that. So then as we go into Wednesday, March 13th, we're going to have the moon applying to a trine with Venus. And this is going to be important because, I haven't had too much of an opportunity to talk about Venus in Aquarius so much. But, as she was in, Capricorn, where she was looking to play by the rule book and things like that, Venus in Aquarius is looking for how things are going to connect the best way. Venus is about connection, synergy, bringing people together, bringing things together, saying yes to things. And as Venus is in Aquarius, where it's not about, trying to handle the chaos from the inside, it's not trying about bringing people together from the middle of the fight, of the battle. It's about going from the outside and bringing everybody in together from the outside in. And so as Venus is in Aquarius, wanting to help you connect the dots and connect more of what can be connected together and what can be worked with to kind of harmonize with, your energy, the collective energy, people around you. That's kind of like Venus and Aquarius' thing. As the moon in Gemini starts to make a trine to Venus, this is really about, what information am I getting and how can I connect that more to other people? And that's not about spreading the message or spreading, being the communicator, being the messenger in that example. This is about going, what do I understand and what do I know now, and why do I need to say those things? What needs to happen with that? And I say why because the moon's going to be applying to an opposition with Jupiter. And this is really important. And as the moon's applying to an opposition with Jupiter while it's trining Venus, you know, Venus is like, hey, I want to bring things together. I want to come from the outside in. You know, you can deal with, you know, isolation, alienation, you know, things not exactly working the way that you would expect them to on an intuitive level with Venus in Aquarius. However, Venus in Aquarius is very much, I really like the sense of not necessarily going from the outside in or being disconnected. It's just more of the idea of valuing, the idea of expression, the idea of Venus being this planet of value, I mean, relationships, love, intimacy, things like that. As she's in Aquarius, it's kind of like, let's take these, you know, these barriers that limit us and let's go around this and see, you know, how we can work from the outside in. And then the moon's in Gemini trining Venus right now. So this, or yeah, during this time. So while the moon's trining Venus, this is very much going to be like, I need to communicate the sense of connection. I need to bring things together in this harmonious way. However, the moon is going to be applying to an opposition with Jupiter, which is kind of like, all right, you've got all of this information. You want to go spread it and connect it and see what you can build with this. But it's opposing Jupiter. Jupiter in Sagittarius is, you know, what is the truth? Not exactly, you know, Jupiter in Scorpio, where it's about discovering the truth and kind of seeing how deep. It's kind of like going into a house that you've never been before, going into the basement, and you're like, whoa, this basement's a lot bigger than I expected it to be. I didn't see this coming. That's kind of like Jupiter in Scorpio. However, while Jupiter's in Sagittarius, this is about, this is the truth. Not, we're discovering the truth. We're discovering, you know, what's happened, you know, in the past. Jupiter in Sagittarius is, this is now the truth. And the moon in Gemini, while it's applying to an opposition with Jupiter, is kind of asking you on Wednesday, you know, with all this information that you're getting, what is the truth? And are you going to be conveying that message to people? Are you going to be conveying that message to yourself? And the other big thing that's happening on Wednesday is we have Mars trining Saturn exactly. And this is very productive, you know, like I have a lot of fire and air in my chart, so definitely people like me can very much use this earth energy. But I also think with Jupiter being in Sagittarius and basically everything else being in Pisces, with let alone Venus and Aquarius, it's kind of like we can definitely use that stabilizing, that grounded earthy energy right now. And the last big thing that is happening on Wednesday on the 13th is we have not Mercury, we have the Sun squaring Jupiter, which is really important because the next aspect that Jupiter is going to make to the Sun is going to be a trine. Now, Jupiter may be squaring the Sun right now, but here in Aries season, when Jupiter in Sagittarius is trining the Sun in Aries, is actually when Jupiter is going to station retrograde. So this does have a lot to do with kind of like Jupiter in Sagittarius and understanding more about what that's going to look like for the next, well, a little bit less than a year now. And so as Jupiter's in Sagittarius wanting to get a, you know, clear forward-thinking shot, being able to, you know, see things in an above way, in a, I don't want to say an ascended way, but kind of like hoping for the best, not being prepared for the worst, but this is about hoping for the best, looking for the best, being optimistic about this truth, being optimistic about this faith. And as the Sun's in Pisces, where it's kind of like, you know, I think I made this analogy earlier, but it's kind of like bringing a light into like a murky lake. Like that light is just making it more murky. It's just making it more hard to see. And so as the Sun's in Pisces, it can be very easy to be so like, I don't see this. This is confusing. I don't know what this is supposed to look like right now. A lot of that has to do with Neptune in Pisces, and it has a lot to do with Mercury retrograde in Pisces right now. But while Jupiter's squaring this, is kind of like, you know, with this light here underwater making the water murky, I mean, like you can't even see right in front of you. Jupiter in Sagittarius is kind of like, hey, you know, what are we trying to see out of this? Why do we need a light underneath the water? You know, what are we trying to see through this? What are we trying to have vision of? And as the water eventually settles down and it gets less and less murky, that's that Jupiter and Sagittarius kind of working, going like, hey, what do I really see? What is the truth? What is the reality behind all of this stuff? So then as we move forward into the next day, on Thursday, March 14th, we're going to be having Mercury Cazimi. That means it's going to be conjuncting the Sun right in the heart of the Sun as it retrogrades. It's going to be squaring Jupiter in the middle of that. And then the Moon's going to be going into Cancer. So while Mercury's Cazimi, I think this is going to be really interesting, only because the idea of a planet being Cazimi, being like basically, what's the word I'm looking for? Purified by fire. That's like, you know, it's conjunct the Sun exactly. Mercury doesn't work well in Pisces. It's in its detriment. It's retrograde. It's squaring Jupiter, which it's in the home sign of Jupiter. So it's kind of like Mercury doesn't get a lot of whole say-so in this. However, as Mercury is conjunct the sun and it's, again, being purified by fire. And I mean, you guys know me. I'm not the biggest one to be like, oh, this is a download of intuition or anything like that. But with Mercury being conjunct the sun in Pisces, I think this is going to be kind of like, although the waters are murky, you're starting to understand the environment and the landscape that surrounds you. Or a good way to put it would be, if you're driving through the fog, it's not that the fog is letting up, but now you can kind of understand where the road's going to go. Maybe it's a familiar place. And I don't want to use the analogy of familiar too much with this, only because Mercury is this planet of communication, understanding, intellect, written words, technology at times. And as Mercury's in Pisces where it's not working good and all of a sudden it's just getting hit by this, the sun in Pisces, it's kind of like, you have that light in the middle of the lake, you're looking around, you don't see anything. Then all of a sudden a fish just like goes right in front of the light and you're like, I saw that. I can't see where the ground is. I can't see where the top of the water is. I can't see anything, but you just saw a fish go by. It's actually the perfect analogy. And so as Mercury is, Cazimi right now and it's conjunct the sun, this is very much like seeing where this confusion lies. That is seeing where the miscommunication and the misunderstanding happen. And that's happening this week. And I think this is going to be a big deal as we go through this Mercury retrograde because, hey, Mercury's retrograde right now. Things are confusing. This is our one moment of like things are clear for just a second. We see it for just a moment. And it's also squaring Jupiter, which is just as important because Jupiter's like, here's the truth. Jupiter's like, this is what you're experiencing. This is what you want to be going towards. This is where that fire is being, this is where the winds that is pushing the fire. This is where, this is the direction the wind is going. So as Mercury goes Cazimi, expect on Thursday, well, that's Thursday, right? Yeah, that's Thursday. Expect to have like an understanding of your situation, of this Mercury retrograde, and a lot of clarity. And it may just be like that, but as you have that experience, don't be afraid to remember that, like it's kind of like, I'm horrible at this, so I shouldn't be giving this advice, but having like a dream journal. When you wake up, or right after you wake up, you have a crazy dream, write it down before you forget. Because then you're like, well, I don't really know what I had my dream of, and I guess I'll just forget about it till the next time. And then the next thing that happens on Thursday is the moon's going to be going into Cancer. And now with the moon going into Cancer, it's going out of Gemini where it's, just going crazy. The moon in Cancer is really about, where do we need to nurture? Where do we need to trust? Where do we need to be more maternal? Where do we need to protect at times often? And then that's basically it. The moon's not actually going to be making an aspect until later on. However, as we move forward into this weekend, on Friday, March 15th, that's, again, Mercury's going to be squaring Jupiter exactly during between Thursday and Friday. And then the moon is going to be applying to an opposition with Saturn on Friday. And so as the moon's applying to an opposition with Saturn, it's getting closer to the North Node. It's not exactly out of Cancer yet, but as it's applying to an opposition with Saturn, this is kind of like Saturn and Capricorn going, this is what needs to be done. This is the groundwork. The moon in Cancer is going, but I want to do this instead. I feel uncomfortable going out here. I feel vulnerable having to do this work. And I think that's a very important aspect to look at this with, because you got to remember, there's a reason why they gave the crab, they gave Cancer the crab, basically. That crab is very protective of itself. It will never let itself be vulnerable, ever. If it does, it's when it changes its shell, and it's for the smallest amount of time it possibly can get. And so while the moon's in Cancer opposing Saturn, it's kind of like, are you trying to protect yourself from Saturn and Capricorn where it can be a heavy weight and it could be a wall and a barrier in your way? Or are you allowing yourself to be vulnerable with Saturn and letting him be a little bit more constructive in your life? And I think that's going to be very important as Mercury squares Jupiter on the same day, where Mercury squaring Jupiter is kind of like, this may not make sense, this may not be what I expected, but this is the reality and this is the truth. The moon in Cancer is like, this kind of makes me feel a certain way, and I don't want to feel vulnerable right now. But Saturn's kind of applying to it, going like, hey, like, if you need to protect yourself, you need to do what it takes to get there. But you may have to find yourself being vulnerable in this moment. You may have to find yourself going like, hey, I can't just lock up how I feel. I can't just detach from that. This is actually how I'm feeling, and you've got to let yourself experience that. So then as we move forward, that's really, honestly, that's the most of this horoscope. Like, Saturday, the moon goes into Leo, whoop-de-doo, now we're feeling high and mighty, we're feeling proud, feeling good, feeling confident. That's basically the only thing that's going on. And this is still going to be in the midst of a Mercury retrograde in Pisces, still in the midst of Pisces season. The moon will then be in aversion to the sun, so they can't really see each other. So I don't want to hit too much on this weekend, only because the moon's going to be in Leo. Whoop-de-doo, like that's really cool, but it's not doing too much. Until Sunday, that's when the moon is going to be opposing Venus, and that's when it's going to start to make a trine to Jupiter. And then once it's opposing Venus, this is kind of going from Venus in Aquarius being like, where do we need to connect and where do we need to put all the dots? The moon in Leo is kind of like, but I want this for me. I don't want, you know, not necessarily, you don't want everyone in on it, but there's a sense of pride. There's a sense of, you know, heart. There's a sense of integrity with the moon being in Leo. And as it's opposing Venus, Venus is asking, how do you get there without... it's kind of like indirect sales, rather than being like, oh, is this good for you? Being like, no, this is good for you. When would you like to buy it? Like, that's kind of like an indirect sales approach in a sense. But it's that idea that how do we get what we value, the sense of connection, the sense of bringing things together, the sense of kind of connecting the dots. And while the moon's in Leo being high and mighty and proud, it's kind of like, how do I get this feeling? How do I get what the moon in Leo needs without doing it in the moon in Leo way? That's just going to be a good way to look at it. But again, it's just the moon opposing Venus. It's not really the biggest deal. It's not going to, you know, change your life. However, then as we go into Monday, by the time we get to this next weekly horoscope, we have the moon trining Jupiter exactly, and it's going to be squaring Mars. So then as we get back to this horoscope we start next week, as the moon's trining Jupiter, I think this is going to be a lot more positive of like, I'm feeling a lot better about understanding what this truth is. I'm feeling a lot more clear and a lot more powerful in my decision making with, you know, what truth I experienced over this past week with Mercury retrograde, and I'm ready to take that on. Because the moon's also going to be squaring Mars, where Mars and Taurus is like, yeah, we have this weight, we have this energy that we're pushing forward slowly but surely in a steady fashion. The moon in Leo squaring Mars is kind of like, hey Mars, you need to pick up a little bit because I'm trining Jupiter right now. Like, I'm on fire and Jupiter's gassing me up right now, so I'm about to catch really on fire, so I need Mars to catch up. And that's kind of like the theme as we start next week, to kind of go like, hey, like, you know, we're starting, not necessarily starting to initiate, however, the moon will be in Leo, trining Jupiter, it'll later go into Virgo next week, and then so on and so forth. It's kind of like, this week we get to experience a lot of this Mercury retrograde stuff like at climax. And then by the time we end this week, it's kind of like, well, we've been there, done that, and this is how we feel about the situation now moving forward. So with that being said, thank you guys so much for watching and liking and commenting and sharing and subscribing. I love and appreciate every single one of you, and I'll be seeing you guys next week.